What's up, guys? So today I got a request for asking what keyboard is good for what. So it's probably gonna be a really short video, but let's start it off with essentially it's not really the keyboard that matters. It's more of what's underneath it, as in the switches. So pretty much let's start with gaming. You can use any switch you want because it just depends. Like if you're a competitive gamer, you're probably gonna want to get speed silvers or your optical yellows, something like that. It's really fast. If you're just like a typer and you want you just want to hear the typing experience, stuff like that, you know silvers, blues, browns, because they got that tactile feel to it, very smooth, and just you have that, I guess, nostalgia. So as I've said before in my latest review, my keyboard has speed, no, these are Gateron, yeah, Gateron speed silvers in these. So it's got a fast bottoming out time. It also sounds iffy. It's not clicky, but it's got a noticeable clack to it. And here's a close-up of the switch. As you can see right there, it is a Gateron Speed Silver, and yeah, noticeable debounce to it. And then with the keycap once again. So I don't actually have all, these are the only switches I have at the moment, but I will do my best to explain the switches and what would probably be good for you. So let's start off with Cherry MX, or just start off with blue switches. So blue switches are clicky to give that auditory feel, when you're typing or when you're gaming and you just want to hear that sound, it brings a good feel. Those have a 45 grams of force with a 1.5 millimeter actuation, depending on the switch, actually, from 1.5 to probably 1.2. 1.5 to 1.2 millimeters of actuation, and as I said before, 45 grams of force. They're not supposed to be fast, but people still use them, like I said, for that just auditory click. And they're mostly used by typists and people who don't mind that very loud switch, because it is loud. You can pretty much hear it in different rooms if you got a hollow house. And I believe I've had it before in a recent keyboard that I have. If you go check out my video of my setup, before I had gotten this keyboard, I had a white keyboard, a RK61 Royal Plug keyboard, white, that had Cherry MX Blues in it. So yeah. The next type of switch we're going to go over is the browns. So browns, they're not as loud as blue, but they still have that tactile feel to it, as if they are, sort of, as I said. But at the same time, it has like a smooth, like a smooth feel to it when you press down on the key. That, once again, is great for typists. Not sure about gamers. I really haven't looked into that. I haven't really seen people that, use those. Because as I said before, they're really for typists, just to give that tactile feel to it. And you'll really see those. You can, most keyboards these days that are meant for just typing will come set with those already put in them. They won't be hot swappable. It'll just be set in there. And you can pretty much just find them on Amazon, which I've come across. I'll probably leave the link in that down below. But yeah, there's that. Oh, right. With 45 grams of force to 2.2 millimeters, 1.8 millimeters, or 1.5 millimeters, those are the general ranges that they come in for actuation. And yeah, so moving on to the next one, we have, let's see. I don't want to move on to reds yet, so I'll go with yellows. I'll go with silvers because there's a lot of those. Or I'll just go with speed in general. So technically, I can't really say silvers because there's speed coppers, there's speed brown, there's speed silvers, there's speed golds, there's burgundy. So I'm really just gonna have to go with this term instead of saying silver. I'm just gonna have to say speed switches. So we'll go with that, speed switches. Um, Speed switches are used for, before optical switches came out, there were Cherry MX speed silver switches. There were Kale box, I think it was Kale box coppers, or it was either Kale or it was Gateron. There was Kale box coppers. There was also Kale burgundy. There were Gatoron speed silvers at the same time, and I believe Gatoron speed silvers, not the optical ones, just the regular ones, had an actuation of 1.1 millimeters, grams of 45 actuation force. No, 40. 40? 40 or 45 was one of those. And the bottoming out time was pretty fast. And like I said, they're all different. So Cherry MX Speed Silvers had an actuation of 1.2, a force of 45 grams. And I'm pretty sure Speed Coppers are the same thing. 1.1 millimeters of actuation, 45 grams of force. That's the one thing, is that instead of 40, it was 45 grams of force, along with the other ones. So it really just generally nothing really ever got past 1.1 millimeters until they made optical switches. And we'll get into that a little bit later into the video. But for now, those switches, which is, like I said, before opticals came out, were the fastest switches that you could get at the time. But yeah, so now we're gonna move on to, let's see. I can't really go into all the switches because there's a lot. There's millions of different colors that do the same thing with different reactions and different, that do different things. Like there's there's box jades, Kale box jades, which I'm pretty sure have a clicky feel to it. There's, like I said, there's gold, there's copper, there's silver, there's jades, there's blues, there's aquas, there's a lot. So yeah, I guess now I'm gonna move on to reds or linears. So we're gonna have to move a little bit more back in time. Before speed silvers came, or like I said, before speed switches came, there were linear switches. Well, less linear switches. We're gonna have to go even more back in time. So before reds came out, there were actually blacks, and blacks were they were the same as reds. They were linear, but they were also heavier. So I'm pretty sure, let's say Cherry Mix black switches had a 1.8 millimeter actuation, and I believe it was also 50 or 55 grams of force. So they were pretty heavy to push down on. And then came linear reds. For most they're red, but so I'm just gonna go based off of that. And those essentially had the same thing. They're 1.8 millimeters, maybe even some were 1.5 millimeters, but they also weighed less, coming at 45 to 40 grams of actuation instead of 55 to 50 grams of actuation. And essentially, those had a more linear to them. They didn't sound like this, and they didn't have a clicky sound. They also didn't have a tactile sound. It was more of just like it was essentially just like a quieter version of this. These, they bottom out fast, and you're typing really fast, so that happens. And yes, I believe that's essentially the history of linear as of now. But since there are different types of linears that aren't the color red, I would have to go over I'll just go over the colors. So there's brown, there's jade, there's emerald, there's blue, there's aqua, there's, as I said before, there's red, there's burnt orange, there's yellow. There's a bunch of them. It's way too many for me to list in this one video. I can probably make a separate video on that, listing and even showing, like physically showing on the camera all of the switches. But that would take a while, so just let me know down below if you would like that. So now moving on to the more, let's move on to the optical side. I feel like I've talked too much about regular switches. So optical switches, I'm gonna have to go off based off of Razer, because that was the first time I'd seen an optical switch. So that's what I'm gonna base this off of. So Razer is a very big company, as all of y'all know. Very big company that makes keyboards, just gaming peripherals in general, monitors, chairs, mice, mouse pads, keyboards, headsets, anything. Their first optomechanical switch. You know what? No, their first optical keyboard was I believe it was the Razer Optical Green, because they have greens, they have blues, they have purples, they have reds, which are now the new linear. They have many, and the two as of now that are optical made are the optical reds and the optical purples. I think the purples are optical. They're also clicky. They're also purple's also clicky. So let's see. With the Razer's purple coming in at around, I think it's 40 grams of force with a 1.5 millimeter actuation. It's also clicky, but it sounds terrible. And that's just because they're stabilizers and all that, which I won't get into. I'll put that in a separate video for the Razer Huntsman Mini, which I will be doing soon, but not anytime soon. Probably sometime next week. And then they have their linear reds. I'm sorry if I said linear purples earlier. I meant clicky purples, but anyways, they're linear reds, which have a force of 40 grams and an actuation of 1 millimeter. The bottoming out time was insane, faster than any switch that was ever made at that wasn't optical. Speed was just a whole different level. We're not going to be talking about the OmniPoint switches on the Apex Pro, because technically I wouldn't count that myself. I wouldn't count that as a true switch because it's using software to make it faster, and it's also not the bottoming out time that's fast. It's, as I said before, it's software. It's the sensitivity of the switch, when it feels pressure added to it, which is not a true switch because, as I said before, it's software. And like I said, the bottoming out time was bad on it. It didn't really bottom out fast. It was just the fact, So the first actual fast switch that bottomed out fast was the Razer Linears. And then came the just in general came the optical switches. And the way an optical switch is made, if I were to just, I gotta take both the keycap and the key switch off. The way optical switches are made are, instead of having to wait for a key press down inside of the board here, the way an optical switch works is there is a laser inside of it that is blocked by the sensor here. And when you press down on that switch, it releases it and the laser can pass through, thus sending a signal faster, meaning you don't have to press all the way down on it, but at the same time, if you do, it bottoms out way faster, which means you'll get a faster actuation. This is what makes optical switches faster than the OmniPoint switches, and that's the reason why I'm not including them. I'm not sure if those are even optical. Now, as of now, the fastest switch you can get out there is the Gateron Optical Yellows, which have an actuation of, I forgot to go over these. But anyways, the Gateron Optical Yellows have an actuation of 35 grams of force, 1 millimeters, and I know it's because 1 like they're all at this point they're all just 1.1. They're all just 1 millimeter of actuation. Like I said, I'm not counting the Apex Pro because that has a 0.4 actuation, only because of the sensitivity of the key and the software on it. The fact that I didn't mean to kick my camera. The fact that they're all 1 millimeter may not seem any faster than any other 1 millimeter switch, but it's not the actuation you want to worry about. It's the grams of force. So because the yellow opticals are 35 grams of force instead of the normal 40 or 45, they bottom out way quicker, thus being lighter at the same time. That is why these are slower than the optical yellows by about 5.5 grams. But they're essentially the same amount of speed if you were to just count the actuation. Same thing with the Razer Linears. These are actually slower than the Razer Linears. and I don't even know how. Sorry about that, my camera died, but you know, as I was saying before, I'm not sure how being the same, you know, having the same amount of force in grams and also having the same amount of milliliter actuation can make a deal between faster and faster if they both have the same thing. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I really don't have anything to say about that except I'm just confused on that. As I'm always hearing it in different places. Razors are faster even though they have the same actuation and the same grams of force. What makes it faster? But yeah. So if I were to, you know what? Let's see. I'll be like this. Any keyboard can be used for anything so long as it fits you. So, you know, if you're a fast typer and you want to have a fast keyboard, then go with speed switches. If you just want to have that auditory click when you type, you know, you want to enjoy the experience, you're going to want to go for the clicky switches. And let's see. If you just want a tactile feel to your keyboard when you're typing or gaming, I should have said gaming for those two as well, but I didn't. I'm sorry about that. But if you just want to have a tactile feel to your keyboard when you're typing, then, you know, go for the tactile switches. All you really have to do is just type in the board before switch, you know, tactile switch, clicky switch, linear switch, speedy switch, speedy switch, speed switch. You know, and it not all switches feel the same. So Kale box or just Kale switches in general feel different from Gateron switches. And Gateron switches feel different from Cherry MX switches. Cherry MX still hasn't made any optical switches, and you know those feel different from, you know, like Dragon Fruit switches or, you know, novelty cream switches or custom switches that are also made, because there are custom switches that are made out there. And it's really just all up to your preference. So there is no specific keyboard for what, where, and when. It's just how it's really just your preference. And I guess it's also the the quality of the keyboard. I don't know how a $10 keyboard's gonna sound with some Cherry or some Gateron optical blue switches. It might sound terrible or might feel terrible. You never know, but just also keep that in mind. It's also the quality of the keyboard. It's not something you want to underestimate. Please don't underestimate that. But yeah, I hope you found this helpful. If not, I need to get better at explaining things. That is my fault. But yeah, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a comment. Tell me what I missed out, because I probably missed out on a lot of things. I know I did. I'm making this very late at night. I shouldn't be. I probably should have made this in the morning. And leave a comment. You know what? Leave a like, and if you liked it, leave a subscribe. You know. Anyways, I'll see y'all later.